The morning started like any other hospital morning. The hallway lights were too bright, the coffee tasted burnt, and the vinyl chair under me creaked every time I shifted my weight. I was scrolling through my phone, not really reading anything, just letting my thumb move so my mind wouldn't. That's when my father said it. "I'm sorry, Claire. We can't help. We already have a trip booked." He said it gently, almost apologetically, like he was canceling dinner plans. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I didn't even ask him to repeat it. I just stared at the wall across from me, where the paint had chipped near the baseboard, and listened as my mother explained how complicated things were right now. They were leaving in 3 days. I said, "Okay." Then I ended the call. 2 weeks later, I stood in front of their house holding an envelope I hadn't planned on bringing when this all began, but I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Claire. I was 35 then. I'd been paying my own bills since I was 19. I'd helped my parents with theirs more times than I could count. Not dramatically, just quietly, covering a gap here, fixing something there. That's how our family worked. Or at least how I thought it did. My daughter Lily had just turned 18. The accident happened on a Thursday afternoon. She was riding in the passenger seat, seatbelt on, scrolling through music, when a truck ran a red light. The call came while I was at work. I remember the fluorescent lights humming above me as I grabbed my keys. I don't remember locking the door. At the hospital, everything smelled like disinfectant and plastic. Lily was awake. Her face was bruised. She tried to smile when she saw me, like she didn't want to worry me. A nurse said the word, stable, and for a few hours I let myself believe that meant safe. By Saturday morning, a doctor sat across from me with his hands folded and his voice carefully neutral. He explained the scans. He explained the risk. He explained that there were 2 surgical options. One was newer, less invasive, a much higher chance of full recovery. It also wasn't covered. The other was approved by insurance. Cheaper, and came with a significantly higher risk of nerve damage, permanent damage. I didn't hesitate. "We'll do the first one," I said. The doctor nodded, then paused. "We'll need confirmation today." I stepped into the hallway and called my parents. My father answered first. He sounded relaxed, like he'd been packing. I explained everything, slowly, clearly, no emotion in my voice. I told them I had most of the money but needed a co-signer to unlock the rest of the emergency loan. Just a signature, no payments, no long-term obligation. There was a pause, then another. My mother asked if I'd appealed the insurance decision yet. I said there wasn't time. That's when they told me about the vacation, the resort, the cancellation policy. How unfortunate the timing was. I stood there with my back against the wall, watching a janitor push a cart past me, the wheels squeaking with every step. I remember thinking how strange it was that the world kept moving at its normal pace. When they finished explaining, my father said, "We're just not comfortable tying our names to something like this." Something like this. I said, "Okay." Then I put the phone face down. That night, I sat upright in a hard plastic chair beside Lily's bed. The monitors blinked steadily. Her breathing was slow and even. I watched the clock above the door and waited for morning. Somewhere between midnight and dawn, I realized I wasn't surprised. I didn't know yet what I was going to do, but I knew I was done asking, and that was the moment everything quietly changed. By morning, the hospital had settled into its daytime rhythm. Shoes squeaked on polished floors. Someone laughed softly at the nurse's station. The smell of toast drifted in from a cart I couldn't see. Lily slept through most of it. Her face relaxed in a way that made her look younger than 18. I hadn't slept at all. I opened my laptop on my knees and started filling out forms. Emergency loan, short-term credit, anything that didn't require time, because time was the one thing we didn't have. Without a cosigner, the numbers shrank fast. Approval amounts dropped line by line until they barely covered a third of what was needed. I stared at the screen longer than necessary, then closed it. Around noon, the surgeon stopped by again. He spoke the same way he had before, calm, professional. He asked if we were still on track. "Yes," I said. He nodded, trusting the word, and moved on. That afternoon, Lily woke up long enough to ask if she could have ice chips. I fed them to her slowly, one at a time, listening to the machine's hum. She didn't ask about money. She didn't ask about my parents. She watched my face instead, like she always had. "You're quiet," she said. "I'm thinking," I told her. She nodded and closed her eyes again. By early evening, I realized I had to make one more call. Not because I wanted to, because the math left me no other option. I stepped out into the hallway and sat on the floor with my back against the wall. The tile was cold through my jeans. I dialed my parents again. This time only my father answered. I explained the situation again, even more simply than before. I told him I'd found a lender willing to release the full amount with a cosigner. I reminded him they wouldn't be responsible for payments, just their names, just a form. He listened quietly. Then he said they'd talked it over. He said the economy was unstable. He said they'd had issues with identity theft in the past. He said online lenders made him nervous. I waited until he finished. Then I said, "Okay, thank you for taking the time." He sounded relieved. I hung up. I didn't cry. I didn't sit there. I stood up and walked, slowly at first, then with more purpose, down the corridor and back into Lily's room. I pulled the chair closer to her bed and opened my laptop again. That night, I made a list, not of debts, of people. I went through old emails, contacts I hadn't touched in years, former coworkers, parents from school activities, a woman from church I used to sit next to. I kept the messages short, no explanations, just the facts. Surgery, time sensitive, any help appreciated. Some messages went unanswered, some didn't. A woman I hadn't spoken to since Lily was in middle school sent $200 within minutes. No note, just her name. Another dropped off a small envelope at the front desk with a card and $50 folded inside. Someone offered hotel points if I needed rest. I opened a spreadsheet to keep track. Dates, amounts, names. It gave my hands something to do when my thoughts got too loud. Lily watched me from the bed. She didn't interrupt. She didn't ask why people she barely remembered were stepping up when others hadn't. She just observed, the way she always had. Late that night, her old friend's mother came in quietly and set a credit card on the table between us. "Use what you need," she said. "It has room." I tried to refuse. She shook her head once. "Let someone help," she said. By the time the clock hit midnight, the numbers finally aligned. I printed the confirmation, signed the consent forms with a borrowed pen, and handed everything to the nurse without ceremony. The surgery was scheduled for the morning. I sat back down beside Lily's bed and waited. That was when my phone buzzed again, face down on the chair, vibrating softly against the plastic. I didn't pick it up right away. I just watched the screen light up, then fade, and then I reached for it. The message wasn't from my parents. It was from a man named Daniel. We'd gone to the same college years ago. We hadn't spoken since graduation. His message was short. He said he'd seen my post online. He said he remembered me staying late to help him study when he was close to failing. He said he'd just wired $500. I stared at the screen longer than necessary, then added his name to the spreadsheet. By sunrise, Lily was being prepped for surgery. The room filled with quiet efficiency. Nurses checked bands. A clipboard changed hands. Someone explained the process again, even though I already knew it by heart. When they wheeled her out, she squeezed my hand once and said, "I'll see you later." I said, "I'll be right here." And I was. The hours passed in a way that didn't feel like time at all, just light shifting through the window, the sound of footsteps, the hum of machines. I drank water without tasting it. I answered messages. I updated the spreadsheet. I didn't look at social media. When the surgeon finally came out, he removed his cap and nodded before he spoke. The surgery had gone as planned, no complications. The pressure on her spine was relieved. Recovery would take time, but the risk of permanent damage was now low. I thanked him, calmly, like I was discussing the weather. Lily slept most of that day and the next. When she woke, she asked for her earbuds. I handed them to her and adjusted the blanket. We didn't talk about my parents. We didn't need to. 2 days later, I posted a brief update online. No names, no accusations, just facts. Surgery completed. Grateful for the support, still a long road ahead. The response was quiet but steady. Messages, small donations, words that didn't try to fix anything, just acknowledged it. That was when something else shifted. Not emotionally, structurally. A week later, I got a call from Greg. Greg had been my grandmother's attorney. He'd also been a family friend, the kind who showed up to holidays and left early. I hadn't spoken to him in years. He asked how Lily was doing. Then he asked a question that didn't quite fit. "Did Lily ever receive the trust distribution from your mother's estate?" he asked. I said no. I told him we'd assumed my parents were holding on to it until things felt right. He went quiet. "That's not how it was written," he said. He explained that the trust had been set up years earlier. It was specific, Clear. Lily was the beneficiary. My parents were only trustees. The funds were meant to transfer automatically when she turned 18. She had turned 18 6 months earlier. They never filed the paperwork, Greg said. They never notified the bank. I felt the room tilt slightly. I sat down. Claire, he said carefully, that money was never theirs. I didn't respond right away. My eyes went to the window, where a car passed slowly through the parking lot. He told me he'd pulled records. He told me about transfers that didn't align with trustee responsibilities, purchases, withdrawals, patterns. It's not a misunderstanding, he said. It's a breach. When the call ended, I didn't scream. I didn't call my parents. I opened a folder on my laptop and labeled it with the date. Then I waited. 2 weeks after the surgery, Lily was strong enough to ride in the car. That's when I parked across the street from my parents' house, the envelope resting on the passenger seat between us. She looked out the window and said quietly, "I don't want to talk to them." "You won't have to," I told her. We sat there as the sun lowered, watching their driveway, and then their car pulled in. I didn't get out of the car right away. I watched my parents unload their luggage. My mother moved first, light and energetic, still wearing the kind of clothes that crease softly instead of folding. My father followed, slower, tugging a suitcase that looked heavier than it needed to be. They didn't notice us at first. They were talking about something trivial. I couldn't hear the words, but I recognized the rhythm. I waited until they both looked up. That's when I opened my door. The sound carried across the street, clean and final. My mother froze. My father straightened. I walked over at an even pace, the envelope held flat in my hand, like paperwork instead of a weapon. "What's this?" my mother asked. "You've been served," I said. I didn't wait for a response. I turned back to the car and drove away. Lily kept her eyes forward the entire time. We didn't speak until we reached a stoplight. Then she exhaled slowly, like she'd been holding her breath longer than she realized. That night, I didn't answer any calls. The next morning, I made a list. Step 1, confirm everything in writing. Step 2, gather records. Step 3, say nothing unless necessary. Greg handled the rest. He moved quickly, methodically. Requests went out to banks. Statements came back. Timelines formed. The numbers told a story no one could soften. Funds had been moved, not once, repeatedly, into personal accounts, toward purchases that had nothing to do with trust management. The vacation made sense now. So did the remodel. So did the new car with the oversized bow for my sister's kids. They hadn't just refused to help Lily. They'd used her money to fund their comfort. My parents started calling again. Voicemails at first. My mother sounded confused, hurt. She said there must be a mistake, that they'd planned to explain everything eventually, that family shouldn't involve lawyers. I saved the messages. I didn't respond. Then my sister texted. She said our parents were devastated, that I was tearing the family apart, that Lily was fine now, wasn't she? Didn't that count for something? I sent her a photo of the hospital bill. No caption. She didn't reply. Lily started sitting in on the calls with Greg. She didn't speak much at first. She listened. She asked for copies. She read the documents slowly, carefully, like she was learning a new language and wanted to understand the rules before speaking it. One evening, I walked past her room and saw her at her desk with a highlighter, marking a clause in the trust document. "I just want to be clear," she said without looking up. I nodded and kept walking. The mediation was scheduled quietly. A conference room, neutral ground, no audience. My parents arrived early. They looked smaller than I remembered, not fragile, just reduced. Greg laid out the documents one by one, dates, amounts, transfers. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't editorialize. He didn't need to. When he finished, Lily leaned forward. "I don't want apologies," she said. Her voice was steady. "I want what's mine, all of it. And I want your names removed from anything connected to me." My father opened his mouth. She raised her hand slightly, just enough. "You had time," she said. "You made a choice." The room went quiet. They refused to settle. Greg smiled once, small and professional. "Then we'll proceed," he said. I put my phone face down on the table and waited. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. The ceiling was low. The benches were worn smooth from years of people sitting and standing and waiting their turn. Everything smelled faintly of paper and disinfectant. I sat beside Lily, her back straight, her brace hidden under a soft sweater. She held a folder on her lap, not because she needed it, but because it gave her something solid to rest her hands on. My parents sat across the aisle. They didn't look at us. The judge entered. Everyone stood. Then we sat. The process moved the way these things always do, slow, deliberate, uninterested in anyone's feelings. Greg spoke when it was time. He walked through the timeline again, not dramatically, just clearly. Dates, accounts, signatures. What was required, what was ignored. The defense tried to frame it as confusion, poor communication, a misunderstanding of responsibilities. Greg slid a printed bank statement across the table. Misunderstandings don't leave patterns. When Lily was asked if she wanted to speak, she stood. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't look at her grandparents. "I turned 18, she said. "The trust was supposed to transfer. It didn't. I didn't know why. Now I do." That was all. The judge asked a few questions, clarifying ones, neutral ones. Then he leaned back and reviewed the documents in silence. The room felt still, like everyone had agreed not to breathe too loudly. The verdict came later. Breach of fiduciary duty, financial misconduct, unlawful retention of trust assets. The consequences were measured: probation, mandatory restitution, community service. The judge spoke about responsibility and obligation, about how trustees are not owners. My parents didn't react. Outside the courthouse, no one yelled, no one cried. My mother looked past me like I wasn't there. My father stared at the ground. For a while, that was it. Then Greg called again. He asked if I was sitting down. During restitution processing, additional transfers had surfaced. An account tied to my aunt's name. Offshore, recent, undeclared. The timing wasn't subtle. "This changes things," he said. It did. The second hearing moved faster. There was less patience this time. The court didn't entertain explanations. Intent mattered now. So did concealment. The sentence was different. A year. No suspension. I watched as they were led away. No drama, no last words, just procedure. Lily stood beside me, quiet. When we got home, I put the kettle on. She went to her room. The house settled back into its familiar sounds. Pipes, floorboards, the ordinary things that don't disappear just because something heavy has ended. Later that night, Lily came into the kitchen holding a document. "They transferred the funds," she said, "all of it." I nodded. She sat at the table and began filling out new paperwork, investment accounts, long-term planning. She moved carefully, reading each line twice. "I want to do this right," she said. "You will," I told her. She signed her name slowly, and when she finished, she slid the papers into a folder and closed it. Then she looked up at me and said, "I think I'm ready to move on." I turned off the light, and we did. The money didn't arrive all at once. It came in stages through official channels with reference numbers and confirmation emails that arrived early in the morning or late at night. Greg forwarded each one without commentary, just the facts, just the proof that systems, when followed long enough, eventually correct themselves. Lily reviewed every deposit herself. She sat at the dining table with her laptop open, the house quiet around her. She checked dates, cross-referenced amounts, printed confirmations and slid them into a thin binder she labeled neatly. She didn't rush. She didn't celebrate. When the final transfer cleared, she closed the binder and set it aside. "That's everything," she said. I nodded. I didn't say congratulations. This wasn't that kind of moment. The restitution covered the surgery costs completely. It also covered the debt I'd taken on in those first frantic days. Greg made sure of that. The remaining funds were placed exactly where the trust had always intended them to go, in Lily's name, under Lily's control. She met with a financial advisor recommended by Greg. Not someone flashy, someone methodical. Someone who talked more about timelines than returns. I waited in the lobby while they met. When she came out, she looked lighter, not relieved. Clear. "I set up a long-term account," she said as we walked to the car. "I'm calling it the Foundation Folder, just for myself." "That sounds right," I said. She didn't ask what I thought she should do with it. I didn't offer. We didn't hear from my parents after that. No calls, no letters, no messages through relatives. The silence felt intentional this time, and I respected it by returning it. Boundaries are easier to hold when they're mutual. Life didn't suddenly change. Lily went to physical therapy twice a week. We learned which movements still hurt and which ones didn't. Progress came slowly. Sometimes it stalled, sometimes it surprised us. She complained about the exercises, then did them anyway. I went back to work. My coworkers didn't ask questions, they just nodded when they saw me again. That was enough. One evening, I came home to find Lily at the kitchen counter, organizing documents into labeled folders: medical, legal, financial. She worked quietly, methodically, like someone restoring order after a long disruption. "You didn't have to do all this alone," I said gently. She smiled, small and real. "I know," she said, "but I know I can." Later that week, Greg called one last time. "Everything's closed," he said. "No loose ends." I thanked him. He paused, then said, "Your grandmother would have been proud." When the call ended, I stood at the sink for a moment, watching the water run, then turned it off. That night, Lily made tea. Chamomile. She brought 2 mugs to the couch and sat beside me. We didn't talk about court or money or the past. We watched something light and forgettable, the kind of show that doesn't ask anything of you. At some point, she rested her head against my shoulder. "I'm okay," she said quietly. I believed her. And for the first time in a long while, I felt like we were no longer bracing for impact. We were just living again. Mornings are quiet now. I wake up before my alarm, make coffee, and open the window just enough to let the air change the room. Lily moves more easily these days, not quickly, just confidently. She leaves her brace on the hook by the door instead of the chair. Small decisions like that tell me more than any doctor ever could. Once a week, she reviews her accounts. Not obsessively, just enough to stay oriented. Then she closes the laptop and goes on with her day. School, therapy, friends, ordinary things, rebuilt carefully. I keep the house simple. I clean as I go. I don't hold on to papers I don't need. When something is finished, I file it or throw it away. Order feels earned now, not forced. We don't talk about my parents, not because it hurts too much, because it doesn't need space anymore. Sometimes Lily will mention someone she met at therapy, another family dealing with paperwork they don't understand yet, another young person learning too late that trust requires structure, not hope. When that happens, I listen. I don't step in unless I'm asked. But I notice, because these situations don't announce themselves loudly. They show up quietly, in delays, in signatures that never come, in money that moves without explanation. And most people don't realize what's happening until they're already carrying the weight. One evening, Lily labeled a new folder and slid it into her drawer. "Just in case," she said. I nodded. That felt right. If this story felt familiar, or if you're listening and thinking about a situation you haven't fully looked at yet, take your time. Clarity doesn't rush. It waits until you're ready to see it. If you're still here with me, thank you for listening all the way through. If you'd like, go ahead and like the video and subscribe. It helps more than you think. And tell me in the comments what city you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. I read those. 2 more stories will appear next, from people who found themselves at quiet turning points of their own. Take care of yourself.